Looks like downtown and big buildings.
That east side is.
Yeah, east side's going up. Go out to 130 used to be cow pastures all the way around.
I'd like to know what the square footage of that building is up there.
Oh, yeah,
My
like
God.
I think million something.
Could put all of downtown Belton inside that building.
Houston College.
It's so odd.
That makes it impossible to do it. You try to play it quick. You have to be here a certain time, certain window. We got trucks that around the circle, around the block. And then the city here, oh, you can't park here. You can't park here. You know, it's built, so built, or what?
So Connor's girlfriend / fiance's her brother-in-law, which is her sister's husband. He works for the Tesla as an expediter to work with people, like your people, with their people, to make sure stuff is there at the right time so things can happen. And when things get backed up or they couldn't get a piece of equipment or somebody's falling behind and all the schedules start to dominate, they pay these expediters to keep them on schedule. Yeah. Right.
It's all just orchestrated.
They're just, and it's,
But
they're
they
on
need to do
call
that
because
now.
they're working 24/7.
They need to do that. That is not. You literally,
But-
you can't get anything done.
Yeah, but Elon Musk does not, he doesn't suffer fools. He can say, "Hey, we're gonna pay for the schedule. I don't care how much it costs, it's gonna be done." Does he? He's smart.
I'll live with whatever.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled Belton City Council meeting for Tuesday, July 27th, 2021. Today, our Pledge of Allegiance will be given to the U.S. flag by Mayor Pro Tem David K. Lee. Our Texas Pledge will be led by City Clerk Amy Casey, and the invocation will be given by Councilmember Craig Pearson.
From in pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Join me in prayer, please. Father God, we come to you in Jesus' name. It's our desire to do the business of this wonderful city in a way that brings you honor and glory, and by so doing, take care of all of our citizens in a manner that is pleasing and takes their needs into account. So, Father, we ask, indeed, we claim your promise that when we ask for wisdom, you provide it, that you are with us, that you will lead us and guide us, and may it be so. And may all of this be done in a manner that brings you honor and glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Craig. Call this meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is public comments, but before we get into that, just a brief comment from here. I would like to just encourage anyone that you know who has not been vaccinated, or you, if you have not been vaccinated. I've been in contact with health officials and Scott and White officials, and we have a serious situation in Belton and Bell County. We have a very low vaccination rate. We have a high incidence of people being hospitalized at Scott and White, and it's very stressful for Scott and White and for the community. So please let me encourage you and anyone that you might know to please consider getting vaccinated as soon as possible. Under public comments, citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may do so prior to the meeting and speak during this item. We have one speaker tonight, and Mr. Troy Finley, if you would come up, and as you recall, have a limit of 3 minutes. You may address the council. We appreciate you showing up. Thank you.
Limited to 3 minutes. Yes, sir. Troy Finley, Troy Finley. My address is 702 South Pearl Street, which is just around the corner. More commonly referred to as the LB Pension Home, which is the gentleman at the room across from us is dedicated to. So, good afternoon. Not that it makes a lot of difference. I haven't received an answer to my last question that I asked at City Council, which was 2 weeks ago. But here's an additional question. Do you feel like an at-large council is the way to effectively facilitate the guidelines set forth in our city charter in the 21st century? If so, do you feel like our current city council is a good representation or an actual representation of the demographics, the diversity, or the districts, if you will, of Belton, Texas? And the reason I ask that question is because I'm a citizen of South Belton. And see, you all know the debacle that is going on down the street here. Now, I came to you guys. I didn't come to you asking you. I didn't come to you trying to hold you accountable to the builder. I didn't do that. I didn't come with a lawsuit that I'm going to sue the city of Belton. I didn't do that. What I came to y'all with was a concern for the safety and welfare of the citizens of Belton, Texas. And once again, like last week, anybody in here that wants to come take a tour of my property and look at it, including you, Chief, I would love that, and see what is being done here. Gentlemen, it is time to lead Belton, Texas. I'm going to read right here, section 4, 186 of our city charter, It shall be unlawful for any person to cover or cause to be covered any part of wiring installation with flooring, lath, wallboard, or any other material until the electrical inspector shall have approved the wiring installation in part or as whole, except as we're in set forth. Gentlemen, I emailed y'all and told you that they came over there and they covered up stuff without doing an inspection. Is that okay with you? Huh? An electrical inspection? Come on now. Come on now. I'm not asking for repercussion for me. I'm not asking for repercussion for my wife or my son that we spent 2.5 years messing with this. I'm asking to you to look out for the safety of our citizens. What other projects in Belton, Texas have been covered up this way?
Thank you, Mr. Finley.
Thank you.
As you
Mayor.
know, according to government code, we cannot take action on an item that is not on the council agenda. The next thing on the agenda is a proclamation recognizing Ashton Vanderveer on achieving the rank of Eagle Scout.
How are you doing there? And you realize.
Read this so the parents can hear this. Whereas the Belton City Council recognizes the valuable contributions of the Boy Scouts of America to our community and to our nation, And whereas scouting provides a foundation, training, and leadership skills that prepare our youth to be leaders of tomorrow. And whereas Ashton Vanderveer joined Cub Scouts in 2010, has been involved with scouting ever since. And whereas Ashton is a member of Troop 101, which is also part of the Longhorn Council. And whereas the rank of Eagle Scout is the highest rank achievable in scouting and is an honor earned by only a small percentage of the youth involved in the organization. And whereas friends and family of Ashton Vanderveer gathered on July 26, 2021 to recognize the faithful and steady path he has taken in obtaining the rank of Eagle Scout with the Scouting Organization. And whereas in recognition of his Eagle Scout project, the citizens of Belton extend their gratitude and appreciation to Ashton Vanderveer for his contributions in restoring parts of our Yeti Pope Park, which will secure its legacy for future generations. Now, therefore, I, Wayne Carpenter, Mayor of the City of Belton, Texas, in recognition of his service to the citizens of the City of Belton, Texas, do hereby declare July 27, 2021 as Eagle Scout Ashton Vanderveer Day in the City of Belton. And I urge everyone to join me in congratulating Ashton and wishing him great success in all his future endeavors. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of Belton, Texas, to be affixed this the 27th day of July, 2021, signed by the mayor and the city clerk. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And as you heard, Ashton's project was to help out in Yeti Poke Park, and we certainly do appreciate that very much. Items 4 through 6 on the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the council and may be enacted by one motion if desired by council, and any item may be removed from the consent agenda prior to voting at the request of any council member, and it will be considered separately. Item 4, to consider the minutes of the July 13th, 2021 council meeting. Item 5, to consider the reappointments to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. Amanda Hendrick, Robin Alanese, and Garrett Smith will be appointed. Garrett is moving from alternate to regular member, and reappoint alternate Judy Owens. And a special thanks to John Gillette for his years of service on that board. He is retiring. Item 6 is to consider authorizing the submittal of a grant application to the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 allocated for the National Endowment of the Arts for the IH-35 mural project and for the establishment and display of artwork in the retaining wall on IH-35 and Central Avenue. And I'd like to pull that particular item. Do I hear a motion to adopt the other items?
I move we recommend items 4 and 5 as presented.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those pass unanimously. And Grants and Special Projects Coordinator Joel Guzman is going to talk to us just for a moment about this grant. I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to add a lot to the community.
Short person here. Mayor, Council, thank you. This was a grant that actually came from the National Endowment of the Arts, and that is usually invitation only grant. Because of COVID and everything, they actually, through the Federal American Rescue Plan Act, the NEA has opened up one-time funding opportunities through this grant for small and rural cities and counties and nonprofits for payment to the artists for their artwork projects, salaries, rent, supplies for COVID prevention or marketing. The city has selected the same vendor who did the library for this project, and you can end up seeing that they did the library project here on the bottom. And on the top is actually where we would want to end up having that mural. The Art Endowment is committed to diversity and equality equity, inclusion, and fostering mutual respect for everyone. And the mural artwork along I-35 would reflect this and more about Belton. And I think that that's very important, that as individuals would end up driving along that service road, they could actually, encompass, what Belton is really about. And that's something that the artist and the city of Belton would all work together to ensure that that the mural would be representative of Belton. The city of Belton is asking for $50,000 to support the mural project, which we hope would allow those traveling along I-35 see the beautiful and diverse place the city of Belton is. The deadline for this grant is August 12th. And we would know if we were actually accepted for this grant by the end of December. What I really would like to end up hoping too, that if we are able to end up having this grant for me to submit, that we would actually start getting some of those invitations for other grant awards from the Arts Endowment, because we did such a great job on this one. So that's pretty much it. We would end up, would like to have your approval for me to submit this grant.
Thank you for the presentation. And I'm excited about the possibilities. Questions from the council, comments?
I think I'm excited to see that happen. It would be really awesome if we could also do the wall that faces I-35, because we've got that big, when you exit 6th, no, past 6th, Central. Anyway, maybe one of these days. So if we can get this one, maybe we can move on up. And,
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
so with that, I'll make the motion that we recommend the grant application process.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you for your time and your effort on that, and looking forward to successful project. Item 7 is to hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from agricultural to commercial 1C1 on approximately 1.99 acres located at 7349 West Highway 190 Service Road, located on the south side of the Interstate Highway 14 frontage road, west of Simmons Road and north of FM 2410. And Planning Director Tina Moore, Staff Planner Tina Moore, going to tell us about that.
I was like, whoa, I got a promotion.
Slow down.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you stated, here is the location of the property. This is I-14, and the property is on the south side of I-14. This is Simmons Road, and this is FM 2410. Here is the property that is being requested for rezone. Here's a zoomed in look at the property. As you can see, the property is vacant. However, they have existing concrete that was left over from a previous tenant. Again, that's that location south of I-14. Here is the surrounding zoning for this location. This area was annexed into the city back in November 2009. As usual, this was assigned in agricultural zoning, and some of the existing property owners around that area have already rezoned to commercial zoning in that area. Adjacent to that property is a commercial 1 zoning, and that's for a convenience store or restaurant that's located at that site. Other than that, across the street is an RV park that was zoned to go over there. And as you can see, there's other commercial zoning around there. And south of 2410 are some residential zoning. The applicant is requesting a zoning change to his commercial 1 to allow for his office. He's a roofing contractor, and he will be establishing an office there. And it's just generally office work, answering the phone, emails, meeting with suppliers, customers, and also a showroom for customers to look at products that they have that are available. As stated, the property was annexed 2009 and signed as zoning. The commercial 1 zoning district allowed for a variety of uses. In that, retail is allowed, office is allowed, auto sales, repair, etc. The list includes all of the uses that are allowed. What is not allowed is outside storage. Here is a list of all of the area requirements in this area. This property is approximately 2 acres and exceeds our minimum requirements. All new proposed buildings will be reviewed for compliance with the setback. It will also be reviewed for compliance with applicable building, fire, site development requirements. In that note, I'd like to just let you guys know that this property lies outside of the city water and wastewater service area. The applicant is aware of that. Dog Ridge Water Supply provides water over there, but it's just domestic water. So there is no fire protection, and the applicant is aware that he will be responsible for providing that fire protection. Also, without sewer, the applicant will be required to install a septic, and that needs to be reviewed by the Bell County Public Health Department. The future land use map identified this area as commercial, retail uses with a lifestyle center overlay. The zoning appears to be reasonable. Notices were sent out to properties within 200 feet of the property, and the city has received no letter of support or opposition. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting on July 20th, and they recommended approval of this rezoning from agricultural to commercial one, and staff concurs with their recommendation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
At this time, we would open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to discuss the zoning change request? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Council have discussion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out the applicant, Robbie Robinson, is here. If you have any questions, I am unable to answer.
Did you wish to speak, sir?
Question I had was, you said no outside storage in the zoning? I mean, do we not store, do you store shingles and other materials?
No, we could definitely supply it.
Okay. I move we approve agenda item number 7 is presented.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Item 8 is to hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from multiple family residential to neighborhood service on approximately 0.255 acres located at 503 North Wall Street, described as Alexander's Addition Block 005, Lot 1, 1/2 of 1, located at the northeast corner at the intersection of North Wall Street and East 5th Avenue. Tina?
Sorry for making you read all of that, Mr. Mayor. Next time I will cut it down a little shorter. Okay, so here's the location of the property. Here is, Avenue, 6th Avenue, FM 93, and here is Wall Street. This property is located on the northeast corner of that intersection. Here's a zoomed in look at that property. As you can see, there is an existing historic house on that property. Here are the surrounding zoning. This application is surrounded by multifamily uses. However, there are nearby commercial uses, including neighborhood services, retail, and Office 1. The applicant is requesting a rezoning to neighborhood service to permit an advertising and market office at this location. Again, the property is located amidst various other office similar uses. This is a transitional area that has access to 6th Avenue and close by downtown Belton Commercial District. The applicant, if approved, the applicant plans to provide the required off-street parking. There are 9 off-street parking that's required. She is planning on putting in a concrete parking lot on the back of the lot. Uses that are allowed in the neighborhood service include all uses that are allowed in Office 1 and 2, and then some other neighborhood convenience, including drugstore, daycare, antique shop, etc. Area requirement, there really isn't much except for the setback information. This is an existing house, so the setbacks are currently grandfathered unless the applicant proposes a new structure. The future land use map identified this area as high density with a commercial corridor overlay because of proximity to 6th Avenue. The request seems to be consistent with the commercial corridor overlay and nearby property uses. Notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the property. The city received 2 letters of support and 1 opposition from the neighbor. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting on July 20th, and they recommended approval of this zoning change. Staff concurs with their recommendation. I just want to point out the applicant, Heather Presley, is here, and she is able to answer any questions that I may not be able to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open the public hearing on item 8. there anyone here who wishes to speak for or against that item? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Council comments or questions?
So in that area, if you don't mind just showing the top level view.
The aerial?
Yeah, aerial, yeah.
Oops, sorry. I'm like
So-
way-
There's one of the streets in that area is kind of a one-way with parking on one side. Is that on that street or is that a different street?
I know what you're talking about, but it's not this area. There is parking for an apartment complex over here, but it is a two-way street, this area.
You talk about the old church.
Yeah, the old
1074
church,
Oh,
Bell-
so here's the
Bellflower
old
Arch.
church.
Yeah.
Is this
Yeah,
the
so there's,
area?
okay.
Very narrow.
Yeah, it's pretty narrow. Yeah, so I think what they did is they made that, instead of two-way, made that a one-way with parking on one side. So my concern is that there's parking because the other areas to the north, those areas have parking lots and this one is a residential without.
And she does plan on putting in parking lot. There is an open area in the back of the property. Let me just show in the back of the property that will be converted to a parking lot. She is putting in 9 concrete parking spaces.
Okay.
And fencing around that for neighbors who are still residential.
Correct. There is screening requirement for the residential neighbors.
I do just get concerned about parking and as residential conforms and we've seen it. And boy, I sure hope you can be sensitive to that. And that off street gets awful, on street gets awful crowded. It's hard to get around. Appreciate you putting in the lots and fencing around. I don't, seems to meet every requirement that we have.
Or 9 parking places planned, is that what
Yes.
you said?
Sir, that's based on the square footage of the existing residence. That's what would be required. 3 off-street parking for the square footage.
Just
I'm
curious, do you have to take down
300.
any trees or will that be able to?
No, we were able to just get rid of a few shrubs, but
Sure.
the big trees will remain.
That's great.
Super.
Good.
Then I'd move that we approve for there. Are we?
Yes.
Yes, without. Sorry.
We are.
I move We approve agenda item 8 is presented.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Good luck on your project. Item 9, to hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from single family 2 SF2 to planned development, single family 2 PD SF2 for property located at 612 East 12th Avenue, described as the Sally J. White Edition, Block 13, lot block located at the northwest corner of Hilltop Street and East 12th Avenue. Ms. Moore, you've been a busy lady today.
Yes, sir. Okay. 5, thank you guys. The location of the property is east of Main Street. Here is 13th Avenue. It is south of 13th Avenue, Hilltop. Railroad tracks is north of that. And here's Hilltop and the intersection of East 12th Avenue. Here's a zoomed in look at the property. As you can see, there is an existing residence there. The reason for this rezoning is the existing residents, they're going through an administrative plat and the lot sizes and setbacks do not meet our existing standards for single family 2. So here are the neighboring surrounding properties. They're all zoned single family 2. And before I move on to the next slide, I want to point out what's going on with the administrative plat. As you can see, there's a small little sliver of property over here that the applicant owned. He is doing some property swap with the adjacent neighbor to the north. So he's providing part of that property in hopes that he'll get additional rear yard in the back. So with that, the applicant is requesting a PD again because of the existing conditions at the house. This will include a reduction in minimum lot size, the width, and the front and rear yard setbacks. Here is a look at the existing property, residents on the property. And here is that proposed plat that I talked about. He's getting rid of that small property and increasing the lot size in the back. Here is a site plan of what is being requested. As you can see, the existing residence, there is existing concrete and a porch over here that is only 11 feet from the front yard. The house on Hilltop is only about 17 feet from the front property line on Hilltop. And the back, even though he's increasing it, is still only 15 feet from the the rear yard setback. With that in mind, what is being requested, the minimum lot size instead of 7,500 will be reduced to 6,500. The minimum lot width instead of 60 will be reduced to 58. The depth of the lot is okay. The front yard setback, again, he does not meet this is a corner key lot. It's required to meet the front yard setback for both Hilltop and 12th Avenue. On Hilltop, it's going to be 17, on 12th Avenue, 11. Rear yard setback instead of 20 be 15. Sides, no change from one of the interior sides. The future land use map identified this area as general residential use, and this PD will still be conforming to that, that requirement. Notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the property. We received 2 letters of support from neighbors. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting on July 20th, and they again recommended approval of the zoning change. Staff concurs with their recommendation, and I want to point out the applicant is here. The property owner, Nathan Wright, is here to answer any questions I might not be able to. With that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Open the public hearing. If anyone from the public wish to speak for or against this item? If not, we'll close the public hearing. And council, any questions, concerns?
Makes sense to me. Looks like we're just codifying what's really been in place, grandfathered, if you will, for a long time, and the neighbors have made some accommodations. If no one has any other comments, I'll make a motion that we approve item 9 as presented.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion, any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Moore. Appreciate that. Item 10.
Still me.
Consider vacating the Mystic River Phase 2 subdivision plat, the 10.071 acre tract of land located east of North Main Street, west of the Leon River, and south of the existing Mystic River Phase 1 subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The property owner has requested that we vacate this plat. He's in the process of selling the property and wants to have a clean title to present to the buyer. So what was previously approved was 16 lots with a 50-foot dedicated right-of-way. All of that will be abandoned. There has been no lots sold in this area, and the public improvements have not been constructed in this area. Because this plat was approved, but council action is required to be vacated with council action, hence why it's back here. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their July 20th meeting, and they recommended approval. Staff concurs with that recommendation.
So basically, they have decided not to do what they had originally intended to do. He wants to vacate this original plat,
Yes, sir.
sell it to a different buyer.
Yes, sir.
Questions or comments from council members?
Guess the only, at least for me, obvious comment is when it ties into the rest of, because this is a subdivision and this is not at the front, this is kind of in there, is if the plan is for someone else to come develop it and potentially put in a similar number of lots, would it be premature to abandon it at this time because it's not doing anything versus, I mean, if it's just like somebody's going to build one big house in that lot, then that's one thing. I guess that's the question, is the intent of the.
Right. The intent is the new buyer will go through the planning process. They will probably ask for rezoning. So all of that will be forthcoming to you once they have a clear record and can purchase the property.
So it just rolls it back to ag now. So as far as where it ties to the other, are there roads already kind of tied and make sure that this is not?
Does it rezone it, David? If you change it, just does what the plat is.
Yeah, but the platting is the roads.
The plat.
And that's where I'm going, is just make sure that there's alignment and access to this and not just a zoned.
Right. The zoning of the property will still remain the single family 2. I want to say
Okay,
it's a PD
gotcha.
zoning. That's not
Okay.
changing onto the applicant request for
Gotcha.
a PD change in the zoning.
Okay.
The roads will be reviewed with the subdivision plat to make sure that it connects and that
Okay.
there are access for any future lots
Okay.
over there.
Any other questions or concerns from council members?
With that, I would make a motion that we vacate the Mystic River Phase 2 subdivision plat.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Tina. Appreciate your presentations today. Item 11 is to hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance amending Chapter 22 of the Code of Ordinances related to the regulation of golf carts on public streets in the city limits of Belton, Texas. We'll have a report from Assistant City Manager, Chief of Police, Gene Ellis.
Good evening. I don't know if I can be as efficient as Tina is. She really is. She's good at that. Bringing golf carts back to you after our discussion a couple of weeks ago and with the proposed ordinance. We talked about last time some of the benefits such as crime reduction, prevention tool, quality of life, transportation, efficient transportation. And so now coming forward with some recommendations for an ordinance. You have an ordinance in front of you. We're using the state code definition, the transportation code definition of golf carts, which is a motor vehicle designed by the manufacturer primarily to be used on a golf course. It does not include those, but they can get pretty fancy with what a golf cart looks like. The state code actually has, transportation code has a separate definition for the UTVs, the ATVs, vehicles like that, side by sides. Required equipment, some of this is actually required by state law: headlights, taillights, reflectors, mirrors, parking brake, slow moving vehicle sign. And we added the horn.
Any horn count?
It could. Yeah.
I'm just asking.
Yeah. It does not say it have to be electronic, and
All the ones I see in my neighborhood already, I'm pretty sure I have
all those illegal ones in your neighborhood. Yeah, yeah.
a
I'm aware of
On the
them.
road.
Yeah. The a lot, actually, surprisingly, many golf carts actually come with a horn. They're foot switch operated, and most people don't realize it's there until they take that left foot and put too far forward to the left. But pretty easy to add. State law does require that.
Starts beeping.
State law, it requires that only licensed drivers, so small kids will not be driving them. That's usually the problem you find in in cities that have had issues in the past. Daytime use only, so dusk to dawn. License plates as required by state law. We've actually amended that since Friday. TML put out a legal brief on this, and it's been some confusion after the last legislative session, and so we've added that back in there. City streets only, which would include, there was a question asked about the getting to our retail areas, especially HEB, Walmart and stuff, and many will be able to. Quite frankly, there's going to be some subdivisions in areas of town that will not be able to get there, but many can get there. Streets with speed limit of 35 miles per hour or less, that's in state law. No FM roads or state highways. And your trivia question in there is 817. Some of you know what 817 is. Waco Road. May cross on an FM or state highway at intersection if it's less than 45 miles per hour at an intersection. This was a question asked last time. If it's greater than that at a traffic signal. And that's the state law says at an intersection, we've added the extra protection in there that if it's one of our faster roadways, that it needs to be at a traffic signal.
Intersection is defined as two-way stop, four-way stop.
A road where another road joins it. It does not necessarily have to have a stop sign.
Okay. Gotcha.
So there are some dangerous ones that people could try to cross, which is challenging. Now, a street that does not line up with another street does not make an intersection. There could be a two-way intersection, but to cross all the way over, it does not necessarily mean it's an
Good thing
intersection.
we renamed MLK or 9th to MLK, because I think 9th went to 9th, but it didn't line up with 9th
Correct.
or something like that.
There's traffic like that at that one, but yes. Of course, we've got a chunk of concrete there. It makes it hard to go straight
Yeah.
across.
It makes it challenging.
It does make it challenging.
You get extra points if you do that.
Allowing it on the trail system, but must yield right away to pedestrians and bicycles, and must move to the right and yield right away to faster moving vehicles. A couple other conditions: comply with applicable state traffic laws and City of Belton traffic laws. All passengers must be seated in a seat designed for passengers and no lap sitting, and may not be operated in a negligent manner, which we define in there, which will take care of those that, whether it's on the street or on the trail, that operate it negligently. And then good old enforcement. Hopefully we won't have to do much of this, but Class C misdemeanor, which would be similar to any other traffic violation, subject to towing, and always civil remedies if it becomes too big a issue.
Chief, was the dusk to dawn a state recommendation?
That was my question.
No, it's not. It was it's actually a best practice. Got it from a lot of other ordinances. I know Salado just started allowing theirs at night. That's a recommendation that I have after looking at some other ordinances.
Just curious about the dawn. Sorry, dusk.
Dusk, which is a half hour after sunset. So it's pretty dark whenever you're at dusk. Probably close to between 8:30 and 9 o'clock right now.
Do you want to say after missing the last meeting, I'm glad to see it's on the table. I think it's a fantastic thing. I do have it for your guys. My suggestion is some sort of pre-printed pamphlet or something that if they see something, or any staff person can have a stash of them, or us, and just hand it to golf cart people that are driving, because we know good and well we can have the laws, but nobody's really going to read them until they get caught, and then to have to explain everything or just say, hey, here's a informational.
Yeah, good call on that. We're going to need to actually work with our public information officer to develop a website with good information, and then certainly some printed material as well to educate the public on what's appropriate use of the golf cart.
So you said that with this would be a Class C misdemeanor, and that's like driving a golf cart without a license, without registration.
No registration, but yeah, without the license plate. So anything violation of those provisions in the ordinance.
Okay.
Same as a traffic ticket.
So what about driving under the influence?
That's actually falls under state law. So that would be a driving while intoxicated charge.
So I was assuming that this would fall in the same category. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It would actually be Class B or greater, and a trip to
So
jail.
grandma can't have too much fun.
No.
Okay.
Can't drive your riding lawnmower that way either. If you're
Yep.
if you're on a public roadway, there's some famous stories like that. George Jones being one of them.
Let's not pick on the grandmas now.
Sorry.
Any other questions or comments? And then I think this requires a public hearing.
All right. At this time, thank you, Chief. At this time, we will open the public hearing. Anyone wish to comment for or against this item? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Any more discussion among council members?
I guess I'd like to mention that our downtown events, we can maybe throw in a best or most fanciest cart contest. You can get there down Penelope, Main intersections or the trails.
It's hard to get across.
Kind of interesting. We've gone from horse and buggy on the Chisholm Trail to the interurban railway from Belton to Temple to automobiles, and now we're going to golf carts. I'm not sure about the general trend here, whether we're going forward or not, but it's good.
Well, I'll go ahead and recommend that we approve agenda item 11.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, sir, for the presentation. Look forward to the implementation process and Paul getting the information out to the public about how that's going to work. All right, item number 12, to receive a presentation and discuss phase 1 of the TERS update project. And John Simsick of KPA is here to present that information for us tonight. Thank you for coming, John.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So what we've been working on is an update of the City of Belton tax increment reinvestment zone. And so what a reinvestment zone is, it's basically a geographic area for which your property taxes on real property is reassigned and utilized on improvements that would foster private development within that geographic area, or that would benefit that geographic area. So to give you a brief history of the Belton TERS, it was established in December 2004 by ordinance number 200464. It includes 2,884.92 acres currently. Tax revenue is generated by the taxable value of real property within the TERS, which exceeds the baseline taxable value. And this is known as tax increment. And I'll get into what that number exactly is a little bit later in the presentation. A big reason why we're here even giving you this update is that the current TERS is set to terminate as of December 13th, 2024. So at this point, decisions need to be made regarding the future of the TERS. One of the questions is, do we extend the TERS or do we let it expire? Do we want to retain the existing boundary or possibly expand it or even possibly contract it? And what future projects can we identify that would facilitate development within the TERS? We'll tackle obviously a B and C are contingent upon how we answer question A. If we decide to let the TERS expire, there's no need to discuss any of the other questions. But we'll work backwards here and talk about what future TERS projects could we identify that would benefit the Belton TERS. Certain types of projects, street projects, that would include mobility improvements, helping to facilitate movement throughout the zone and areas around it. Trails, sidewalks, shared use paths. An example of this right now in construction is the South Belton shared use path along the northbound I-35 service road. Drainage projects, needs no explanation there. It's basically to facilitate storm runoff control. Municipal projects, this could include things like parks, Heritage Park being one of those types of projects where we make improvements that are livability improvements. TERS incentive grants, these would be your facade improvement grants, some of which have been done recently downtown. And maintenance projects, and these projects are rehabilitation of existing improvements within your zone. So it could be preservation of existing streets, putting seal coats, or doing cement stabilization, reclamation type projects on existing streets to bring them back up to speed. And I know this is a little bit hard to read, and I think you've got handouts of this that maybe show it a little bit clearer, and if not, I can get you an even larger version of it. But this is a list of projects of each of those categories that I just went over that were identified by teamwork of the Belton City staff and also KPA. Preliminary opinions of probable costs are provided for each of those projects, and you'll see at the bottom total amount of these projects totals a little over $87 million. And so that might sound like a large number, but it is, yes. You'll see as we get into the analysis of the funds later on in the presentation that projections would actually meet this amount. Moving on to the next slide. This just shows the locations of those projects in that previous list. as far as the streets and drainage projects. And you'll see that in the kind of purplish pink, those are the drainage projects that were identified. The yellowish orange are the street projects that were identified. And you'll notice that they're primarily in the growing southern parts of the city. The yellowish boundary you can see is the existing TERS area. And then the areas in blue, we'll get into that in a little bit. Those are proposed areas of expansion of the TERS. And one thing you might notice is that on those street projects, some actually extend beyond both the TERS limits and the city limits. And so one of the things with TERS improvements, they can actually be done outside of the boundaries of the TERS itself. It just has to be shown that they provide benefit to the TERS itself. So transportation projects fall neatly into that category because you're moving people in and out. This second exhibit here is the list of projects that were the trail and sidewalk projects. And then those are in the purplish pink. And then the green are the parks improvements projects. Heritage Park is the large green area up in the upper right part of your exhibit there. And then there are several other projects, the Standpipe Park being one, library expansion, and so on. And so then, assuming the TERS performs well and we blow through that list of projects and still have some money left over after that $87 million is spent, here's another $88 million in projects that were identified that we can move on to. So there was no shortage of projects out there. So as far as, are we going to be concerned that the TERS is going to generate a bunch of revenue and it's just going to sit there with no way to use it? We don't have any good projects. We've got plenty of good projects to use it on. So that is definitely not an issue going forward. So the next thing we looked at was the current boundary of the TERS. And here's an exhibit from the City of Belton's website showing the existing TERS and its configuration. It generally goes from South Belton along the I-35 corridor, goes up inside Loop 121, again, following generally from between Connell and the east side of I-35, and then picks up the downtown area, goes east along FM 93, and then it has a narrow track that goes up along Main Street and gets up into the area where you have Grand Avenue Theater, Walmart, HEB, those areas, generally following again that FM 317 Main Street corridor. And then the one outliers, and again connected by a narrow corridor, that's Heritage Park up in the northeast corner. So when we started looking at possible revisions to the boundary, some of the criteria we looked at was the City of Belton future land use map. We wanted to see what the plans were of the city going forward with undeveloped properties. One of the reasons properties may only be included in the TERS if they are located within the city limits. So definitely we want to stay within the corporate boundaries of the city. And we also want to identify undeveloped properties in commercial, retail, industrial corridors. And that goes back to you want to get undeveloped properties if at all possible, because once they develop, it's going to be that tax increment, the amount after you've brought them into the zone, whatever that taxable value of that property is going up, you subtract that from what it was at the time you took it into the zone. And now that's what you keep for use on zone projects. We want to minimize the addition of properties currently classified as single family, and that's due to a regulation within the state law that regulates TERS. that a single family component of the TERS taxable value cannot exceed 30% of the overall taxable value of the TERS. We also evaluated future TERS projects with respect to benefits to properties located within the revised boundary. And that goes back to those exhibits that I showed you earlier and how they relate back to the existing and proposed boundaries of the TERS. So now what you're looking at is the future land use map for the city. And one of the things you'll notice is there's a lot of pink shading and blue shading along I-35 and also I-14. The pink represents mixed use and commercial plan development. The blue would be lifestyle type development, retail, restaurants, those types of developments. So those are the kinds of areas that we're targeting to bring into the TERS. The pink can also represent dense residential, multifamily, shopping, entertainment, those types of developments. The yellow that you see in all the other areas are varying densities of residential. And then the greens, there's only a couple of those scattered about. Those would be neighborhood centers, small scale commercial types of development. So this is an overall view of the areas that we identified for potential growth of the TERS. It's broken down into 4 areas. The first one being along the western Loop 121 corridor, and then following along the southern I-14 corridor, and then over to FM 1670. The second one is generally located west of I-35 between Shanklin and Tahoyah. And then the third one is generally east of I-35, bounded on the east side by the Lampasas River. And then there's one isolated way up in the north, bounded basically by River Fair Boulevard in the Leon River. And it's located on the west side of FM 317 Main Street. Here's a closer look at each of those areas. And so one question you may ask is, well, why did you only pick up the south side of I-14 and not the north side? And we did look at the north side of I-14. Most of those properties fell into 2 categories. They were either already developed or they were classified as single family residential. And so neither one would bring much value going forward to the TERS. This is a close-up view of the second area between Shanklin and Tahoyah, generally located west side of I-35. There's the third area. And then the fourth area up to the north. So then this slide shows the, it basically gives you what the acreage is now of the existing TERS. And as I mentioned earlier, it's 2,884.92 acres. By adding these properties, that would raise the acreage within the TERS to 4,032.58 acres. And side by side, those 2 rightmost columns are the taxable values as of fiscal year 2021 for both city of Belton and Bell County. Those taxable values are very similar. There's only slight differences between the 2. The revised TERS boundary, you'll notice that the taxable value jumps from $291 million to $303 million. And then there's a breakdown by each of those different areas that we were proposing to bring into the TERS as to what they would contribute.
Can I
Yes, sir.
just ask a quick question about
Yep.
that north boundary, the 304 acres?
Yes, sir.
Isn't that primarily residential or residential development?
It's undeveloped at this point. It could go residential, and the trick to it is we would be taking it in before it goes residential. Yeah.
You get the increment on all of it.
It would only count against you the next time you try to modify the TERS boundary, if it happens to take you over that 30% threshold. So the TERS taxable value baseline at this point is $61.8.9 million. That's what the value of the taxable value of the TERS was back in 2004. As you can see, it's now grown to 291 million within that same boundary. When we add these properties to it, that taxable value, the baseline value would change. That 61.9 million holds the same for your baseline of your existing zone. And then you add in the current taxable value of the added properties. So if you take those added areas and they total up to currently 12 million or 12.3 million roughly, you would add 12.3 million to that 61.9, and that would get us to a new baseline value of the TERS of 74.2 million roughly for the two entities, if that makes sense at all. And one question you might ask, you look at these taxable values of these different areas that we're looking at, and the West Loop 121, I-14, FM 1670, that's $11 million. And then you go down to the largest area, that one's 330 acres roughly. That I-35 West area is 365 acres. And it's only got a taxable value of $67,000 roughly. And you might ask yourself, why is that? Well, it's all ag. And so the ag exemption takes that taxable value way down at this time. Market value on it, if you go look that up, there's a huge disparity there. So that's why you see those numbers like they are. So then our next step after reviewing the boundary and how we might modify it would be to review the revenue possibilities. And so we analyzed various scenarios for future revenue generation over the next 20 years, basically from starting in 2022 and running out through 2041. We looked at multiple growth rates ranging from 1% to 7%. And 7% is actually your 10-year average growth rate in the city of Belton. And so you'll notice.
For the TERS.
Yes.
Not the city of Belton, yeah.
No, within the TERS. And so you'll notice we used a 3.5% annual growth at the top of that table to be a little bit more on the conservative side going forward for these next 20 years.
When you were looking at the 7% growth rate, was the trend upward? It seems that it was.
Yes. And we actually have
The
some.
last few years have really helped it because it hockey stick the last 2 or 3 years.
Very sharply.
Right.
Yeah, it's a steady deviation from what we anticipated until we get this.
Yeah. And so in that table, you'll see what the tax revenue is generated within the TERS. Under the current boundary, you would get $73 million over that course of that next 20 years between the city of Belton and the Bell County's participation in the TERS. And if we revise the boundary, that number jumps to 81 million, which is right in line with that original list of projects that I'd presented to you earlier. As we move down to that bottom table, the TERS effect on the city of Belton, fiscal year 2021 proposed budget, you can see what the taxable value is within the city as a whole. It's roughly at 1.1 billion. The TERS total property tax taxable value sits at 291. that represents 25% approximately of the entire value. And the reason that's important, if you go down to note 4, the TERS cannot represent more than 50% of a city's total taxable value. So sitting at 25%, we're very much in the safe zone there. Going down a little further, when you look at the TERS residential taxable value, sits at approximately $83.5 million. And so of that 291 taxable value of the TERS, you're sitting at approximately 29% of that being residential. And remember, I said earlier, 30% is your threshold on that. So we're very close. With the modified boundary that we've selected to identify here, we would actually drop, and you'll notice the amount goes up to 85 million, but the percentage actually drops to 28%. And that's because we're actually raising the taxable value of the TERS to 313. So it goes from 291 to 313. The overall percentage actually drops on residential. So going in the right direction there. So then this little graph shows the accumulation of tax revenue within the zone over those next 20 years. And you can see the red line would represent City of Belton's contribution to the TERS, the green line being Bell County's, and then the purple would be the combined entities. And you see the same trend in the next one. This would be for the modified boundary, but you'll notice the numbers skew a little bit higher. And so you're sitting at 81 million by the time you get to the end of that 20-year period in 2041. So with all of that being said, our recommendations going forward would be to, 1, extend the life of the Belton TERS for an additional 20 years. 2, seek an agreement from Bell County to continue as a full contributing partner. 3 is one that we've left in here. We've talked about it. Says to explore BISD participation in the Belton TERS. We have explored that. At this time, we're not recommending moving forward with that. The reason being, back in 1999, prior to that time period, if a school district joined up with the TERS and became a participating entity, they got reimbursed by the state. Essentially, whatever tax got reassigned out of theirs, the state came and made them whole. So it was a win-win for everybody. In 1999, the legislature, I think, realized that they were losing money on the deal, and so they put an end to that. A TERS or a school district can still join up with the TERS, but they no longer get reimbursed for it. So their incentive for joining is no longer there. And I believe Mr. Listy has contacted the Belton superintendent and had discussions with him about it. And basically that is the sentiment from them. The 4th item would be to extend boundaries of the TERS to include the following areas. And it's those 4 areas that we've gone over: the area north of River Fair Boulevard, west of FM 317, west side of Loop 121, south side of I-14 and the FM 1670 corridor, west side of I-35 between Shanklin and Tahoyah, and the east side of I-35 between Toll Bridge Road and the Lampasas River. And then our final recommendation would be to adopt a new project list, similar to what we presented in the beginning of this presentation, and incorporate that into a financing plan and submit that back to the state for extension of the current TERS for another 20 years. That concludes my presentation. I got one other thing here. There was a second handout that I included. When we presented this to the county, Judge Blackburn had a question. He wanted to see how the history historically, the tax revenue generated by the TERS compared to what the projections looked like. And so I don't have this on the presentation, but in the handouts, you can see how that spike that y'all talked about here in the last couple of years, it really went up. You can see how we're budgeted to our projections actually bring that back down and then flatten out slightly back to that 3.5% annual growth rate going forward over the next 20. You can see where if we continue anywhere close to the growth rate we've seen the last few years, how our numbers could be vastly on the low side as far as projected revenue. And so we could very well get into that second list of projects going forward if all continues to go well. If not, we still feel comfortable that 3.5% is a conservative growth rate that we can count on going forward.
Thank you very much, John, for your presentation.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Listy, did you have
I have
comments?
a couple of comments I'll make. The TERS, as you know, has been an extremely important mechanism for us financing capital improvement projects in the community. And as we look forward to the termination of the current TERS coming to an end, we spent quite a bit of time evaluating how to maintain or retain and even expand the opportunities that the TERS has provided. It's also a fantastic partnership with the county. As you can see, a number of the projects that we've done in the past have involved county facilities as well. And as we presented to the county also indicated there were a number of projects they wanted us to contemplate as we amend the project and financing plan. And so extremely important mechanism. I think it served us well. John has indicated that it's also really important to get the zone established as soon as possible as a number of these areas are undeveloped in order to capture that value prior to the time that it develops. And so I think they've done a fantastic job on the report and certainly timely to proceed and with the goal of trying to get these changes in place as soon as possible. We did explore the opportunity to include the school district. There are a number of projects in the vicinity of the school land that they purchased that we've done some analysis of future capital improvements that might be needed in those areas with the idea that there might be the chance for participation. But as we came to learn the change in the law that really disincentivizes them from participating, it became clear as I spoke to Matt and talked with the school board members that just really was not a realistic possibility, given the fact that they would lose that revenue that would go into the zone. So we recognize that, but we still feel like it's an important mechanism for us to use going forward. And the county and our presentation of them was supportive of the changes that have been recommended.
Comments from council members?
Well, I understand the TERS and the benefit that it's had. I think all for extending that another 20 years. I think the only concern I have is the residential property. I think now we're at 25% and pushing that to the 30% max right at 29. And I just don't know how much opportunity you have for reinvestment in a residential development. And the true intent of the TERS is to reinvest, spark additional development, and reinvest in those zones that we've either extended or created. And so I just am a little cautious about that. And I understand the county's dollars are their contribution. I would hope that we could partner with them on some other things to maybe free up some downtown space and property that they have, but just a little cautious about undeveloped residential land, especially in an existing development.
So I've got the benefit of being with the TERS and walking through this as we've looked at the maps and moved maps here and there. And the big thing that when you start the TERS, right, it's not when you end. When we start and we expand it, it needs to be at a threshold of 29% or less. The reality is you can have 5 homes, just 5 homes on 1 acre. And you may have a 400-acre tract right next to it. And those 5 homes are 50% of the total appraised value, because that other 300 acres could be appraised at 100,000 ag. And the 5 homes could be, $500,000 each. And so it's skewed not as far as the percentage of land. It's skewed as is what is the tax appraised value at the time that you run the study. So the vast majority, I would say 85 to 90% of what's there is really just not developed. Just not developed. It's just,
But it is an existing development now.
no, I'm just, no, we're talking about the stuff that we're adding is not developed. And all those areas like the barn, right? That area, that's ag. When we look at down south on I-35, those are
But
ag.
that's not gonna be industrial, commercial, retail, that's gonna
No,
be rooftops. would be my
No,
understanding.
I don't think they will be.
We don't know that. Some of those may well be commercial retail. I think it's impossible. I appreciate what you're saying, John. I just think some of those areas, it's impossible to know right now how it's going to turn out.
So an example was that when we did a Lake Road, at the time we started the TERS, Sparta Road and Lake Road were really dominated by houses. I mean, it was the Potts had an old white house that now Walmart is there. And we had all the houses up and down Lake Road that are now, Sonic. And I mean, that's how, and so for the most part, we've tried to identify those areas that are going to have heavy growth that would be core areas for the city, not the hinterlands of the city. These are core. And so we're trying to keep it in what it's intended to do, because if you look at the last 20 years, the area in the TERS is growing at twice the rate of the city combined, right? The city total is 3%, TERS is 7%. If you took the TERS out of the 3%, the growth rate of the city is less than 3%. So it's anyway, so the TERS, because we're reinvesting in that area, has really become a huge economic engine. And the other thing, again, in thinking about this a lot, is one of the challenges that the city of Belton has had for a long time is we're a fairly small footprint with a lot of exempt properties, from universities to schools to churches to county. This is one way to kind of flatten that and make it a little more equitable, where now the county is able to contribute and we can help partner with them. So, I think it's a good thing. When we set this up 20 years ago, I think the intent was just let it go and then end. But it's done such a good job for the citizens. You look at downtown, what it looks like today because of the TERS versus what it was looking like 20 years ago. So again, I think it's a strong tool, and it's quality of place is really what it's done. And because of our success, ironically, Temple's TERS is starting to do a lot of quality of place things now, not just specific business things. So it's interesting how things change.
I would think that maybe somewhere between John's point and y'all's is that this 300 acres up north is quite possibly be multifamily. Like, I mean, there's a lot of that up there, and that's a whole nother.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but keep in mind, multifamily does not count towards that residential percentage. So that would be just like a commercial development at that point.
That's kind of what I could see being likely there, but
yes, sir.
Again, we don't know for sure, but.
And my only concern is that TERS can't pay for fire, police, and water and sewer and infrastructure outside of its boundaries. And so that falls on the citizens.
Actually, it can pay for water, sewer, and infrastructure outside of its boundary as long as it benefits the TERS.
Water and sewer outside the
Yes,
boundaries.
that's correct.
Right.
Yep.
And that's a change. That's a change in law that is helpful. And we look pretty critically at that whole issue of that boundary up there and how much to include in the TERS, because you do have that balancing act of you take that those revenues, those property taxes away essentially, but you get the benefit of the county participation as well. So it's a balancing act for sure. The right mix.
I'm just saying.
No, I think we're just sure. No, I think there's good question for sure.
We've expanded it several times since I've been on the council, and it's worked out well.
Sam, one of the questions related to what John said was, okay, there is a balance here because you can't pay salaries with it. doing a salary study. We know we're behind. We've got some catching up to do. But my understanding and my belief from having discussed it before is that we feel like we're at the right balance, leaving what we are outside the TERS and taking what we are, that we can do what we need to do on the non-TERS things like salaries effectively.
There's a mix of decisions, obviously, that have to be made. This is one, certainly property tax rate and those issues and the continued revenues that we're seeing are certainly positive and can help us there. So again, a balancing act, but we feel good that this is the right mix to take full advantage of the county's participation. Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Other comments or questions from council members? I agree. I think, as Craig pointed out and others have said, it's a balancing act. There's not, I don't think there's a perfect map exact where you want it to be, but we have a really good relationship with the county at this point in time. And it's very beneficial to us, and it's beneficial to the county for the county seat to thrive. And this has been very valuable in helping us, as David and others have talked about, quality of life issues that I think impact more than just economic growth. They're real drivers. People want to be in Belton. They want to locate in Belton. And part of that is a result of some of the things we've been able to do through TERS. And, that old baseball joke from Saturday Night Live, TERS has been very, very good to us in many ways. So I really do appreciate that. Chico Escuela, that was his name. Yeah, but anyway, all joking aside, I appreciate the report. I think it's good. Drawing perfect boundaries may be impossible, but I think y'all have done a great job.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I would just say this, in my 43 years of sitting over here, the creation of the TERS, and just as importantly, the management of the TERS by the TERS board has been without a doubt the single most influential thing that's happened to the city of Belton. The projects that TERS funds are generational. And those are the type of things that out of our budget, we just are unable to do. And TERS has changed the city in a good way that most people just don't even have a understanding of. And it's not just downtown, it's all over the south, north, everywhere.
Parks as well as
Everything. It's without a doubt, it's the creation of the TERS 20 years ago was the greatest thing ever happened to Belton, in my opinion.
And certainly appreciate the county's continued support of us.
And I include that when I said not only the creation, but the management of the TERS. Our TERS reps, their TERS reps, they've worked well together. They've done right by the city. They really have.
And thank you to David for your service on that board. Thank you. Guidance in that area. Any other discussion? If not, do I hear a motion to? Well, we don't do any action. I was ready to do some action.
We're prepping for the next
We're
one.
prepping for number 13. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. Sounded good. Consider authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with KPA Engineers for phase 2 of the TERS update project. Mr. Listy, is there anything left to say?
Just a brief summary. Of course, this has been an important item we focused on the last year, 18 months, as we saw the termination of the TERS coming. And of course, KPA was hired to do the initial analysis. This is obviously the follow-on item to implement the plan, and basically is the phase 2. So we have before you a scope of work that KPA has put together to implement an updated TERS. And it's a substantial amount of work to take the vision that has been laid out by the KPA plan and by the work of the TERS boards to do a couple of things. First, to do a boundary revision, which is field notes, surveyed, and so forth. Develop a project plan and a financing plan for the 20-year time period. Again, that'll involve coordination with the county on their projects and ours as well. And certainly a number of meetings. Probably about a 6-month effort or so. We hope to have it substantially done by the end of this calendar year. And the cost for that is $37,420. We have some money set aside in the TERS budget already. We may need a minor budget amendment to complete the process. But we would recommend the council's approval of the agreement with KPA to proceed with phase 2.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would appreciate entertain a motion.
I move we approve item number 13 is presented.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that measure passes unanimously. And thank you to everybody involved in that. And David's not here, but I know he's been involved in that for a long time. Appreciate that very much. Item 14, presentation of fiscal year 2022 proposed fee schedule for the city of Belton. Staff report from City Clerk Amy Casey.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you'll recall, each year during budget preparation, the departments go through and review the fees and the rates that we propose to be included for the next fiscal year's budget. So this presentation is going to show you what we're proposing to change for the next fiscal year, effective October 1st. In the library, there's a little bit of confusion now when people make a copy. They think they might be making a black copy, but they might be using a color copy. So there's confusion in what rate they should pay. So Chris went through and did an analysis of the cost to actually print the copies for them. And we have decided on a rate of 25 cents, whether it's black and white or color. And that more than pays for the cost to actually make that print. And then the library board is also recommending that there be no charge any longer for scanning to email. So we're going to remove that charge in the library. Now, the fire department, Chief Fontenot called together a large committee to review their charges. They haven't been thoroughly reviewed like this since I've been here. So they've done a very good job in identifying additional costs that don't show up in the costs that were listed on the fee schedule. So as you can see, there's been personnel added to the equipment because the equipment can't run themselves. So he's gone through with his staff and reviewed what other cities charge and then tried to determine our actual costs. So you can see without me going through that, there's a number of changes in the rates that we're proposing, and that's based on adding personnel to the cost of fire services. And
Would a brush fire be a major incident, or we charge somebody to go out and put that out for them, or help
Chief,
them
if
with
you'll
that?
open your microphone, thank you.
It could be, depending on what caused the fire, how many acreage burned. Think of a hazmat truck that flipped over and spilled a bunch of fluid. We would have to use that brush truck at that point if it got into the ground and started a fire. So just to cover our bases, what if we went ahead and put it on there? We listed all of our vehicles.
Okay, one
So if I
other,
wanted to do a preemptive brush fire, could I rent one for $250 an hour? I don't think it'd take more than an hour and a half.
We can talk about that.
Training.
Training.
all right, the fire marshal, the way the fee schedule was written for the fire marshal's charges was confusing, not to just the public, but to the staff, and exactly how to charge someone for the services that they perform. So they went through and divided the fire marshal services up into construction permits and inspections, annual permits and inspections, and occurrence permits. So going back to the construction permits and inspections, this section is just going to replace what is already existing. Some of these are just a carryover from the existing rates, but the large majority of them is just completely restructured so that there's not as much, or hopefully none, confusion in what rates to be charged. And if you have any specific questions about any of these, I will let Chief Fontenot address that. All right.
Just thank you, Chief, for getting all that. Sounds like it's been a while since that's been reviewed. So thank you for getting all that information together.
You're welcome. And you're right. It was kind of confusing to me whenever I was looking at it. And one of the themes that I hear from council a lot is that we want to make it simple for our customers. Let them come in and know exactly what they're paying for, kind of a one-stop shop. And that's what we were designing this around.
Thank you.
Right. They've also added a damaged fire hydrant fee. Just clarifying that it's the actual material cost plus 10% plus the equipment at $100 an hour, and then the cost of labor as well. On our water tapping fees, we added the water meter fees to it as well. You know, we recently changed how we work with contractors in placing meter boxes and such. So we needed to add a meter box where they replace the lid only, and the Public Works Department is recommending $12 per lid replacement, and that's based on actual cost. In both the water tapping fees and the sewer tapping fees, it was kind of confusing what services were included in those. So we went through and thoroughly detailed out the services that are included with that fee. The finance department suggested that on our utility disconnects and reconnects that we just simplify the entire amount there instead of trying to list everything that could ever happen, turn it off, turn it on, check, leak, whatever. Just to go ahead and put it as outside of normal working hours at a certain rate, and that rate includes our overtime costs. And then the finance director thinks that people will want to read the budget and CAFR more if they're free. So he's recommending to allow them to be received at no cost for one bound copy. And then if they want additional copies, they can download them off the internet.
That's awesome.
So there's no action.
Two of those requests.
Do it.
We should offer somebody a payment if they read the CAFR.
Yeah. So there's no action required tonight. We'll come back to y'all at the special called council meeting on September 7th to adopt these fees for our fee and rate schedule for FY 2022.
Thank you very much, Amy, and appreciate your touch of humor there. I'm sure John will read the entire budget. And
Well, I did have one item, and a citizen made comment about it a few months ago, and that's the sprinkler meter minimum fee of $17, I believe it is. That a lot of folks don't use that at all during the winter, and they're charged $17 every month. And if you're in a mud, you're charging, you're getting charged of 1.25% of that in addition. And can we explore some type of minimum usage and the fee going away?
For the irrigation
So
meters.
that they don't have to pay it.
We'll look into that.
And I think Dave mentioned that, a small business could be paying much as a resident who has 2 meters and is trying to be a little more efficient on our sewer system.
We'll look into that and bring a
Thank you very
recommendation
much.
back.
any other comments?
I think the only thing to consideration of that would just be what is the monitoring cost per meter, the electronic reading and or some of your, that'd be the only, but I'm again agreed about, I don't know, if they buy their own recommended meter or have something.
Because they're paying for that meter tap fee.
Yeah.
The second tap fee already.
Please.
Thanks, John. Good point. This time we will adjourn the regular council meeting and reopen into executive session.